Grab your coffee, mama. It's time for coffee, clients, and nap time. I'm Sarah Marie, and this is your guide to building a business that works for you and your family. Here, we'll dive into creating a thriving business that lets you be the hands-on parent you want while designing the life you've always dreamed of. So if you're ready to balance business success with family life and make it all work in a way that feels right for you, then let's dive in. Hey mama, and welcome back to Coffee, Clients and Nap Time. I'm Sarah Marie, and today I want to talk about something that's been coming up a lot in conversations lately. And it's this feeling that as modern mums, we're somehow failing at something that previous generations seemed to handle with grace. Maybe you felt it too, that nagging sense that you should be able to do it all. Raise beautiful, well-adjusted children, maintain a spotless home, cook nutritious meals from scratch, contribute financially to your household, stay connected with your friends, support your partner, and somehow still have energy left for yourself. And when you can't seem to do it all perfectly, you wonder what's wrong with you. Why your grandmother seemed to glide through motherhood while you feel like you're drowning. Why could your mum take years off work to focus on family when you're back at your desk after just 22 weeks of government-paid leave, pumping milk in a storage closet? But the reality is that if we feel like we're failing, it's not because we are. We're now playing a completely different game to the generations before us, but we're still holding ourselves to their standards. Today, I want to explore how motherhood has changed across the last few generations. Not to blame anyone or say any generation had it easy, because they really didn't, but to help us understand why we feel so overwhelmed and give ourselves permission to acknowledge that what we're attempting is genuinely harder in so many ways. Because once we understand the game that we're actually playing, we can stop beating ourselves up for not winning a game that doesn't even exist anymore. So let's start with our grandmother's generation, because understanding their experience helps us see how much the world has shifted. Our grandmothers were raising families in a time when gender roles were clearly defined. Most women didn't work outside the home once they had children, not by choice necessarily, but because that's how society was structured. Their job was home and family, and society supported that role. They had extended family networks that we can barely imagine today. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins often lived in the same town, sometimes on the same street. When our grandmothers needed help, there was a built-in support system. Someone could watch the children while they went to the shops. Someone could bring a casserole when they felt unwell. And someone could offer advice when they were struggling. They also had neighbourhood communities where women supported each other. Stay-at-home mums were the norm, so there were always other women around during the day. Children played in groups with minimal supervision because the whole neighbourhood was watching out for them. But here's what we need to remember. Our grandmothers were also fighting battles that we can't fully appreciate. They were living in a time where women couldn't get a bank loan without a male guarantor. They couldn't keep jobs if they got married in many professions. They had limited access to contraception and sometimes had no choice about family size. They were expected to be grateful for whatever their husbands decided about money, housing, and all those major life decisions. Many of our grandmothers were brilliant women who never got the chance to pursue education or careers they might have loved. They poured all their intelligence and creativity into their homes and their families because that was the only outlet available to them. They also lived with a kind of economic vulnerability that's really hard to imagine. If something happened to their husband, be it death, illness, or abandonment, they often had no income, no work experience, and definitely no safety net. The security of a single-income household came with such enormous risks. So yes, they had community support and clear role expectations that might have made day-to-day parenting easier in so many ways. But they also had limitations and challenges that we're fortunate not to face. The expectations placed on our grandmothers were different from ours, but they weren't necessarily easier. They were expected to be perfect homemakers, gracious hostesses, devoted wives, and nurturing mothers, all while having very little control over their own lives and futures. Our mothers' generations also lived through one of the biggest social shifts in modern history. They were the first generation where women could realistically choose between their careers and their family, or attempt to have both. Many of our mothers entered the workforce in probably the 70s and 80s, when women's liberation was creating new possibilities. They could get credit cards in their own names, pursue higher education in greater numbers, and enter careers that have been closed to their mothers. But when it came time to have children, our mothers often had options that we don't have today. Single-income households were still financially viable for many families. Housing was more affordable relative to income, and university education didn't require massive debt. And these factors meant that our mothers could often afford to take extended time off work, sometimes even years, to solely focus on raising their families. I know mothers from this generation who took 5, 10, even 15 years out of the workforce to raise their children. They volunteered at schools, organised community events, and were available for every afternoon pickup and sick day. Some returned to work when their children were older, and some never even went back to formal employment. This generation also benefited from some of the community structures their mothers had built, while starting to create new support networks. They had playgroups, mothers groups, and neighbourhood connections. They could call on family members who were still geographically close and available to help. But our mothers' generation also faced their own unique challenges that we need to acknowledge. Those who chose to stay home for extended periods often found themselves locked out of the workforce when they tried to return. Their skills had become outdated, technology had moved on, and employers were reluctant to hire women with large gaps in their resumes. Many of our mothers accumulated little to no superannuation during their child-rearing years, leaving them financially vulnerable in retirement. They sacrificed their own career progression and financial independence for their family, and many are still dealing with the consequences of that choice. Those who tried to have it all, career and family, often found themselves pioneering in workplaces that weren't designed for working mothers. They faced discrimination, lack of flexibility, and enormous guilt about being away from their children. Our mothers were also navigating changing expectations about what motherhood should look like. They were caught between their mother's model of intensive homemaking and emerging ideas about women's potential. Many felt pressure to prove that they could do everything, be perfect mothers and successful professionals, without acknowledging that this might actually be impossible. They were writing the playbook as they went, without role models or guidance. They made sacrifices and compromises that shaped their lives in profound ways, and many of them did so with grace and strength that we can only admire. Now let's talk about our own generation, because understanding what we're up against is the first step in giving ourselves some grace. We're raising children in an economic reality that's fundamentally different from previous generations. Most households now require 2 incomes to maintain a middle-class lifestyle. Housing costs have increased dramatically relative to wages. University education comes with significant debt, and even basic living expenses take a larger percentage of household income than it did for our parents. This means most of us can't afford to take extended time off work, even if we wanted to. We're returning to work after a mere 22 weeks of government-paid parental leave. That's only about 5.5 months, whether we feel ready to or not, because we need the income. For those of us who are building businesses instead of returning to traditional employment, the pressure is even more intense. We're trying to maintain client relationships, meet deadlines, and generate income while also caring for young children. There's no sick leave or annual leave when you're self-employed. There's no colleague to cover your work when your child is unwell or childcare falls through. Mums in business are often working around nap times, after bedtime, and during school hours, constantly juggling client calls with school pickups and trying to sound professional, while a toddler might be having a meltdown in the background. We're building something from scratch while also being primary caregivers, often with less support than mums in traditional employment because we don't have the workplace benefits or predictable schedules. But the reality is, whether you're in traditional employment or building your own business, we're still expected to perform all the same roles that stay-at-home mothers performed, but just in our spare time. We're expected to maintain beautiful homes, cook nutritious meals, organise our children's activities, volunteer at school, maintain family relationships, and somehow still advance our careers or grow our businesses. We're also raising children in a world where extended family support has largely disappeared. Grandparents often live in different cities or states. Aunts and uncles are scattered around the country, and the neighbourhood communities our grandmothers relied on don't exist in the same way. Instead of having built-in support networks, we're expected to arrange and pay for everything ourselves. Childcare, house cleaning, meal delivery, after-school care, all the things that used to be handled by extended family or community networks are now services that we have to research, book, and budget for. We're also parenting in the age of social media, where we can see curated versions of everyone else's family life. We see mothers who seem to have perfect homes, well-behaved kids, successful careers, or thriving businesses, and somehow still look all put together. We compare our behind-the-scenes reality to their highlight reels and wonder why we don't measure up. The expectations placed on modern mothers are genuinely overwhelming. We're supposed to be emotionally available and patient with our children while also being productive and focused at work or building profitable businesses. We're supposed to provide enriching activities and experiences, whilst also maintaining household efficiency. We're supposed to prioritise our children's needs while also maintaining our own identity and relationships. And when we struggle with this impossible balancing act, we blame ourselves. We think we're not organised enough, we're not efficient enough, we're not strong enough. We think previous generations had it all figured out, and we're somehow failing. But what if the truth was actually simpler? What if we're not failing? We're just attempting something that's genuinely more difficult than what the previous generations faced. There are some huge differences between our generation and the previous ones that aren't obvious, but they do make a huge impact on our daily experience of motherhood. The first is what researchers call intensive parenting. Our grandmothers and mothers loved their children deeply, but there wasn't the same expectation that every moment should be optimised for child development. Children played outside unsupervised, entertained themselves, and weren't enrolled in multiple activities from toddlerhood. Today, we feel the pressure to be constantly engaging with our children, providing educational opportunities, limiting screen time, and ensuring that they're getting enough physical activity, social interaction, and creative stimulation. We're not just keeping our children safe and fed anymore. We're supposed to be optimising their development at every moment. We also have access to vastly more information about child development, which can be both a blessing and a curse. We now know about attachment theory, brain development, the importance of emotional regulation, and dozens of parenting philosophies. This knowledge can help us be better parents, but it can also create anxiety about whether we're doing enough or even doing it right. The mental load we carry is also different. Previous generations had fewer choices to make. There were standard ways of doing things, community expectations that guided decisions, and less analysis of every choice. We have endless options for everything from childcare to education to extracurricular activities, and we feel responsible for researching and choosing correctly. Technology has changed our experience of work too. Our mothers could leave the office and be done for the day, whereas we carry our offices in our pockets. We can be reached by clients, colleagues, and supervisors at any time. For mums in business, this is even more pronounced. There's no HR department to set boundaries, no company policy about after-hours communication. We're available to clients whenever they need us because we're afraid of losing business if we don't respond immediately. We're also dealing with what economists call the motherhood penalty, the career and financial costs that come with having children. While previous generations expected women to step back from careers during motherhood, we're almost expected to maintain our professional momentum while also still being fully present parents. For mums building businesses, this penalty can be even steeper because we don't have the protection of employment laws or workplace policies. The logistics of modern life are more complex too. Our grandmothers might have shopped at one grocery store, banked at one branch, and had relationships with the local shopkeepers who knew the families. We're managing multiple online accounts, comparing prices across different platforms, coordinating pickups and deliveries, and navigating systems that change constantly. For mums in business, add to this the complexity of managing client relationships, marketing, bookkeeping, and business development, all while trying to maintain professional credibility despite working around nap times and school schedules. Even basic tasks like organising children's activities require more coordination. Our mothers might have signed their children up for one sport or music lesson. We're managing multiple activities, coordinating schedules with other families, arranging transportation, and ensuring our children have the equipment and preparation they need for each and every activity. Understanding these differences is crucial because it helps us escape the comparison trap that so many of us fall into. When we look at our grandmothers and see women who seem to manage large families with grace and efficiency, we need to remember that they were playing by completely different rules. They had community support, clear role expectations, and a society structured around single income households with stay at home mothers. When we look at our own mothers and see women who took years off to focus on family, we need to remember that that was financially possible in a way that often isn't today. They also made significant sacrifices in terms of career development and financial independence that had long-term consequences. This doesn't mean previous generations had it easy. They faced their own challenges and constraints that we're fortunate not to deal with. But it does mean that comparing ourselves to them just isn't fair or helpful. We're not failing at the same task that they succeeded at. We're attempting a different task entirely, one that is arguably more complex and demanding in so many other ways. We're trying to be financially contributing partners while also being emotionally available parents. Whether we're climbing corporate ladders or building businesses from our kitchen tables, we're trying to advance our professional goals while also being present for every school event. We're trying to maintain perfectly organised homes while also working full-time or managing client deadlines. We're trying to provide enriching experiences for our children while also managing complex logistics without extended family support. When our grandmothers seemed to glide through motherhood, they were focused primarily on one role, mother and homemaker. When our mothers appeared to balance everything effortlessly, they often had the luxury of extended time at home or were pioneering in a way that came with significant personal costs. Whereas we're trying to excel at multiple roles simultaneously, with less support, more complex logistics, and higher expectations than any previous generation. For mums in business, we're also trying to build something from scratch while managing all of these competing demands, often without the safety net of employee benefits or predictable income. So what does this mean for us? How do we move forward with this understanding? Firstly, I think we need to redefine what success looks like for our generation of mothers. We can't use the same metrics that previous generations used because we're not living the same lives. Success for us may look like finding a sustainable balance between work and family, rather than excelling at both simultaneously. For mums in business, success might mean building something profitable and sustainable, rather than achieving rapid growth at the expense of the family's well-being. It might mean being good enough at many things rather than perfect at everything. It might mean prioritising our children's emotional well-being over having a perfectly organised home. We need to acknowledge that some things will slip, and that's not failure, it's just reality. We might have takeaway for dinner more often than our mothers ever did. Our house might be messier than our grandmothers ever were. Our children might have more screen time than the parenting books recommend. We might miss some client calls because of school events or reschedule business meetings because of sick children, and that's okay. We also need to be more intentional about creating the support systems that previous generations had naturally. This might mean hiring help where we can afford it, building chosen family relationships with other parents, or being more direct about asking for support from our partners and extended family. For business owners, it might mean joining mastermind groups or business communities that understand the unique challenges of running a business while raising children. We need to challenge the cultural expectations that just don't make sense for our reality. We can't be expected to perform the same level of intensive homemaking as stay-at-home mothers while also working full-time or building businesses. We can't be expected to be constantly available to our children while also meeting professional demands or serving clients. We need to be advocating for systemic changes that support working families. Longer parental leave, flexible working arrangements, affordable childcare, and workplace cultures that understand the reality of modern parenting. For mums in business, we need to normalise the reality that business and family life intersect, and that professional success doesn't require sacrificing family presence. Most importantly, we need to extend ourselves some grace, and the same grace that would extend to a friend facing similar challenges. We need to recognise that we're doing something genuinely difficult, and that struggling doesn't mean that we're failing. While we can't and shouldn't try to replicate the experiences of the previous generations, there definitely are some valuable lessons we can take from each one. From our grandmother's generation, we can learn the value of community and mutual support. Even though we might not have extended family nearby, we can be intentional about building relationships with other families, neighbours, and community members. We can then create the village that doesn't exist naturally. We can also learn from their approach to resourcefulness and making do with what they had. Our grandmothers didn't have endless consumer choices to antagonize over. They made decisions with the information and options available to them, and then they moved forward. Sometimes our paralysis around having too many choices creates more stress than just picking something good enough and moving on. From our mother's generation, we can learn about the importance of carving out identity and purpose beyond motherhood. Many of our mothers fought for the right to have careers and maintain independence, and we can honour that by pursuing our own goals and ambitions while also being present parents. We can also learn from their experience about the long-term consequences of different choices. Our mothers who stayed home for extended periods often struggled with re-entering the workforce and building retirement security. Mothers who worked full-time often felt guilty about time away from their children. Understanding these trade-offs can help us make more informed decisions about our own paths. What we can offer to future generations is a model of motherhood that acknowledges complexity and rejects perfectionism. We can show our daughters that it's possible to be ambitious and nurturing, successful and imperfect, both working and present. We can model asking for help, setting boundaries, and prioritizing well-being alongside achievement. We can show them that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing everything else about yourself. Now, based on everything we've discussed, I want to remind you of some important truths about being a mother in our generation. What you're attempting is genuinely difficult. You're not weak or disorganized or failing. You're just trying to do something that requires enormous skill, energy, and resilience. Whether you're managing a corporate career or building a business from your dining room table while your toddler plays nearby, you're navigating complexity that previous generations simply didn't face. Comparing yourself to previous generations who are playing by different rules isn't helpful or fair. Your grandmother's clean house and your mother's volunteer schedule don't reflect your failures. They reflect different life circumstances, different economic realities, and different support systems. You get to redefine success based on your actual life rather than inherited expectations. Success might mean everyone is fed, safe, and loved rather than having a perfectly organised home and enriching activities every day. For mums in business, success might mean steady income and happy clients rather than rapid scaling and constant growth. Asking for help and paying for services that make your life more manageable isn't failure. It's strategic resource allocation. Hiring house cleaning, ordering grocery delivery, or using after-school care frees up your time and energy for the things that matter. For business owners, outsourcing bookkeeping or hiring a virtual assistant isn't a luxury. It's often essential for sustainability. Setting boundaries that protect your well-being and your family's needs is not only acceptable, it's necessary. You don't have to be available to work colleagues at all hours. You don't have to respond to client emails immediately. You don't have to volunteer for every school activity. And you don't have to accept social invitations that stress your family. You can prioritize some things and just let others slide. You can focus on your children's emotional development and worry less about their rooms being perfectly tidy. You can prioritize family dinner and accept that it might come in the form of a delivery service. You can build a successful business and accept that some client calls will have kids' voices in the background. What you're accomplishing deserves recognition, not criticism. Managing a career or building a business while raising a family in today's world requires skills and stamina that previous generations didn't need. You're doing important work on multiple fronts, and that deserves acknowledgement. Most importantly, trust that you're doing your best with the resources and circumstances you have. That's all anyone can do in any generation. Your best looks different from your grandmother's best and your mother's best because you're living a different life with different challenges and different opportunities. As we wrap up, just want to remind you, every generation of mothers has faced unique challenges and still found ways to love their children and build their families despite those challenges. Our grandmothers created stable, loving homes within significant constraints on their choices and opportunities. Our mothers pioneered new ways of combining work and family, often making personal sacrifices to create opportunities for us. And we're continuing that evolution, finding ways to raise happy, healthy children while maintaining our identities and contributing to our family's financial security. We are not the first generation to feel overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood, and we won't be the last. But we might be the first generation to have enough information and awareness to acknowledge that the game has changed and to adjust our expectations accordingly. The next time you feel like you're failing at something that previous generations handled effortlessly, remember, you are not failing. You figured out how to be a mother in a world changed dramatically from the one your mother and grandmother navigated. You're rewriting the playbook for future generations of mothers who will face their own unique challenges and opportunities. The grace you give yourself, the boundaries you set, and the balance that you create, all of these will become part of the foundation for your daughters and the mothers who come after you. You are not supposed to have it all figured out. You are not supposed to be perfect. You're just supposed to keep showing up with love, doing your best with what you have, and trusting that your best is enough. Because it is enough. You are enough, exactly as you are, in this generation, playing by these rules, doing this incredibly difficult and important work of raising that next generation. So if this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear about it. Please send me a DM at BalanceBizMama and tell me, what expectations are you ready to let go of? And what do you want future generations of mothers to know? And if you're ready to connect with other mothers who understand the unique challenges of our generation, I invite you to come join us in the Balance Biz Mama Circle, because while we might not have a built-in community support that the previous generations have, we can create our own village of mothers who get it. So remember, Mama, you're not failing at the same game previous generations have played. You're actually playing a completely different game, and you're doing so much better at it than you realize. The rules have changed, the support systems have changed, the expectations have changed, and the economic reality has changed. So give yourself credit for navigating all of that while still raising children who feel loved and creating a family life that actually works for you. You don't have to be your grandmother or your mother. You just have to be the best version of yourself in your circumstances, with your resources, in your own generation. And from where I'm sitting, watching mothers in our generation love their children fiercely while building careers and businesses, managing households, and somehow keeping it all together, you are doing such an incredible job. So until next time, give yourself some grace, trust your instincts, and remember, you've got this. Thanks for joining me on Coffee, Clients and Nap Time. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another mum who's ready to build their dream life. You can also join our Facebook page or Instagram to stay connected every day of the week. The link is in the show notes. Just remember, you've got this, and I'm here to help every step of the way.